in Connecticut. So give her flowers, and she didn't see it, and that's okay. Me and Steph are great. Steph is great with all of us, and so it's really the outside noise that's trying to distract us, but we're good.
It's simply because you brought up a player who was incredibly close to me. Did you feel like there was even more outside noise surrounding the team after that game?
You know what? I really don't care. I really don't care anymore. I'm trying to keep the main thing the main thing. I think we played an excellent game today against the against the Liberty.
Listen, when you really examine what just happened, you have to realize this wasn't some ordinary disagreement over the wording of a reporter's question. This wasn't a routine moment of irritation at a press conference. No, the reaction felt much more personal than that. It came across as emotional, intense, and deeply rooted in loyalty. That kind of answer doesn't sound casual. It sounds like someone instinctively protecting a person they genuinely care about.
On countless and numerous occasions, severely booed Stephanie White. Booed her damn near out of the arena, which lead me to believe Indiana fans is sick of Miss Indiana basketball.
And what Caitlin Clark just said from that podium has now split the WNBA conversation straight down the middle. Because she didn't merely offer a soft defense of her head coach and move on. She went considerably further than that. In the process, she challenged her own supporters, including the same incredibly dedicated fans whose enthusiasm helped push attendance to historic record-breaking levels throughout the season.
Sophie with the sneak this. They played a good game against themselves. Damn.
We played ourselves.
Yeah,
nice, Sophie.
We won. We shared the ball. I think our defense was really good. I think the third quarter we kind of were a little slumpy, but we got it back, and that's what's important. And you know, we're trying to focus on the big picture here, and I think we really needed this win, and that is our focus: is every day trying to get better. And tonight we took care of business.
The same supporters who helped transform Indiana Fever games into some of the hottest and most difficult tickets to secure anywhere in women's basketball suddenly found themselves on the opposite side of the argument from the team's biggest star. Caitlin looked toward the cameras, addressed what had happened inside the building, and made it unmistakably clear that hearing the reaction toward her head coach made her feel sick.
And I just gotta be honest, I'm not surprised whatsoever. What we've seen displayed in the last recent weeks from Stephanie White has been completely disrespectful, not only to the players of the Indiana Fever basketball team, but to every Indiana Fever resident that live in the city of Indianapolis, that spend their hard-earned working money going to these games, going to meet and greets, staying after the games to meet some of their favorite players.
So before going any further, we need to establish exactly what triggered this entire controversy. Ahead of Indiana's enormous high-pressure matchup with the New York Liberty, the crowd inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse loudly booed Stephanie White when her name was announced during the pre-game introductions.
Days where I've been really upset, and you can have the thickest skin in the world, but sometimes it does get to you. And, I think our world is just like, we love to hate. We love to divide. Like, that's all we want to do. Like, nobody wants to see each other succeed. And I think that's a really painful thing for myself to watch. I feel like we need to do a better job at uplifting each other. And I can assure you there was no way we were losing this game tonight. And I told her that before the game. Like, there was no way we were losing this game for her. And, it's tough.
That's my head coach, and that distinction clearly matters to Caitlin. But we also need to accurately describe what happened. This wasn't a tiny group of people somewhere in the upper level quietly expressing disappointment, and it wasn't a short burst of mild disapproval that disappeared immediately, based on accounts from people who were actually inside the arena and experienced the atmosphere firsthand. The reaction was noticeable throughout the building.
I hated that our fans booed her before the game. That made me a little sick, to be honest.
Whoa.
And you can disagree and this and that, and I get it. It's professional sports. People are going to boo, but at the end of the day, that's our head coach, and we're going to ride for her, and we're always going to have our back, and that's never going to tear our locker room apart. So I just love her, and I feel for her because I know it can be a lot at times, and she does a great job a lot of times blocking it out, but there's other moments where it can get under your skin, and that's just being human, and that's just life. There are tough days and there are tough moments, but just proud of our group.
Wow.
I think we showed what we're all about tonight. We came out, we had fun, we shared the ball, and we played with joy and a smile on our face. And to be honest, we really just did it for her, and we did it for each other and the girls in our locker room.
The boos reportedly carried loudly enough and lasted long enough that nobody inside the arena could realistically pretend they hadn't heard them. And this wasn't simply a spontaneous emotional response to one questionable substitution, one late timeout, or one frustrating possession during a close game. The reaction represented something much larger than a single basketball decision. It wasn't simply frustration over one isolated coaching mistake or one questionable substitution.
I feel what Caitlin is saying, because she's adding a human element to it, as basically saying Stephanie White has feelings too. Here's what I have to say about what Caitlin just said. Caitlin, fans have feelings too. Fans aren't just tags on the internet, aren't just names on Twitter.
By virtually every description of what led to that moment, this was weeks of accumulated frustration finally erupting in public. Feelings that had been building, simmering, and getting increasingly intense among sections of the fan base suddenly spilled into the arena in the most direct way possible. And if you want to understand why this situation became so explosive, the context surrounding those boos is absolutely essential.
What about us and our feelings? We paying for this. We pay to see this. We're not paying our money to see a coach throw our players under the bus, Caitlin. We're just not, we don't want to even pay for that. We have to pay to see this. What about us? That's all I'm saying. I feel where she's coming from. I desperately, deeply do. But what about us? Get down in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts about this. Keep them bells on.
This entire controversy followed comments from Stephanie White that many fans interpreted as an accusation that they were contributing to division surrounding the team. She spoke publicly about outside noise and suggested that the constant criticism surrounding Indiana could negatively affect what was happening internally. To a lot of supporters, the message sounded like the fan base itself was being blamed for creating tension around the locker room. Now put yourself in the position of those fans for a moment. These are people who had spent an exhausting season riding every emotional high and low alongside this team. They bought expensive tickets and merchandise, traveled to road games, watched night after night, and defended these players constantly whenever criticism erupted online. So when they heard the head coach discuss outside noise in a way they believed was directed at them, many understandably felt insulted. To them, it sounded less like a coaching explanation and more like the people financially and emotionally supporting the franchise were suddenly being treated as part of the problem. And this is where Caitlin Clark's response becomes so interesting, because she didn't really approach the subject by defending a specific offensive system, rotation pattern, defensive strategy, or late-game decision made by Stephanie White. Instead, she moved the conversation into an entirely different space. She framed it around empathy. She framed it around emotion. She reminded everyone listening that Stephanie White is a real person with real feelings, and that a constant barrage of public criticism can eventually affect anybody. And that point, taken by itself, is completely reasonable. Coaches are human beings. They have difficult days, they deal with enormous pressure, they hear criticism, and they feel the emotional weight of being judged publicly just like anybody else would. Nobody with basic empathy should deny that. But there is another side of the equation that can't simply disappear because the coach is under pressure. The supporters are human beings too. The people who booed Stephanie White inside that arena were not all anonymous social media accounts hiding behind usernames. Many were ordinary Indiana residents spending real money on season tickets. They were parents bringing daughters to see Caitlin Clark and the Fever in person. They were working people using money from their own household budgets because they cared enough about this team to support it financially. So when those same supporters believe the head coach is blaming them for internal problems or describing their criticism and passion as divisive outside noise, they are going to have emotions about that as well. And that is precisely why this controversy is much more complicated than simply deciding whether fans should be nicer to a coach. There are legitimate basketball criticisms of Stephanie White that have nothing to do with personal attacks, toxicity, or internet drama. There have been questions about rotation choices, including moments when impact players remained on the bench during crucial stretches. There have been concerns about defensive approaches that opponents appeared to diagnose and exploit repeatedly. There have been debates about timeout usage and late-game management that generated criticism from basketball observers. And there have been press conferences where some fans felt the responsibility placed on the players sounded heavier than the responsibility being accepted by the coaching staff. Those are basketball arguments. People can disagree about whether each criticism is fair, but merely raising them does not automatically make a fan divisive. It's also useful to compare the situation with former Fever head coach Christy Sides, because she faced a tremendous amount of criticism during her own tenure. At times, the online reaction toward her was relentless. Yet one major distinction fans have pointed out is that she generally didn't publicly frame the supporters themselves as the source of the team's difficulties. She absorbed the criticism, made whatever adjustments she believed were necessary, and continued doing the job. Whether somebody preferred sides or white is almost beside the point. The contrast fans are focusing on is how each coach responded to external pressure, and supporters immediately recognized the difference. Then this story became even more unusual, when political figures in Indiana began publicly commenting on the situation and calling for accountability. That is not something you normally see around an ordinary professional basketball coaching controversy. When elected officials begin discussing a sports franchise publicly, it demonstrates just how far the issue has traveled beyond ordinary post-game debate. They were responding to concerns that had clearly reached a level where constituents were talking about the situation outside the arena and outside the normal sports media bubble. Whether those politicians should be involved at all is a completely separate debate, but their involvement unquestionably intensified the story. Then Caitlin stepped in and emphasized that the locker room remained united. She said the players had each other's backs, defended the culture inside the team, and pushed back against the idea that outside criticism represented what was actually happening internally. And maybe everything she's saying about the locker room is completely accurate. Maybe inside those closed doors the players and coaches genuinely remain connected and supportive. But that creates an obvious question. If the outside noise really isn't creating a significant internal problem, why did Stephanie White feel compelled to discuss it publicly in the first place? Why elevate it during media availability if the team is genuinely unaffected? That's the contradiction critics are focusing on. Either the criticism from outside the locker room is having a meaningful effect on the group, which would explain why the coach addressed it, or the team is successfully insulated from all of it, which is the picture Caitlin is presenting now. Those two narratives sit awkwardly beside each other, and fans are naturally trying to determine which one better reflects reality. The timing of Caitlin's defense also matters. This press conference came after a huge emotional victory over the New York Liberty. Indiana had just produced an impressive performance against an elite opponent. The building was energized, the players were excited, and Caitlin had every reason in that moment to feel fiercely protective of the group around her. Defending your coach immediately after a major win can feel like the most natural expression of team loyalty imaginable. But the fans who booed White weren't reacting solely to that one game. Many of them believe they have been watching patterns develop over weeks or months. Players living in the middle of a demanding season experience everything from a completely different perspective than supporters evaluating the bigger picture from outside. That doesn't automatically make the fans correct, but it does explain why one emotional victory isn't necessarily going to erase all of their previous concerns. And whether people like hearing it or not, booing has always been one of the ways paying sports fans express dissatisfaction. They don't have access to ownership meetings. They can't walk into the front office and demand an explanation. Most will never personally speak with the coaching staff. So inside the arena, applause and boos become two of the clearest ways supporters communicate approval or frustration. Booing does not inherently mean somebody hates Stephanie White as a person. It doesn't automatically mean anyone wants harm to come to her. In most cases, it simply means a portion of the crowd believes the team is being handled badly and wants the organization to hear that dissatisfaction. That relationship has existed in professional sports for generations. Teams charge fans significant money for tickets, parking, concessions, jerseys, subscriptions, and everything else connected to the product. In exchange, those fans expect the freedom to react honestly to what they are watching. What is the alternative supposed to be? Fans pay premium prices, sit quietly, applaud on command, and never criticize anything regardless of what happens. That's not passionate fandom. That's passive consumption. And there is a major irony here because the very intensity that organizations celebrate when supporters are cheering is the same intensity that can turn into loud criticism when those supporters become frustrated. You cannot demand passionate engagement when that engagement benefits the business, and then suddenly decide passion is unacceptable when it produces a negative reaction. The WNBA's recent growth, stronger television interest, rising attendance, merchandise demand, and expanding commercial opportunities have all been fueled by increased fan attention. That attention comes with scrutiny. The two are connected. Organizations don't get to fully enjoy one side while pretending the other should disappear. And Caitlin Clark has now been placed in an incredibly difficult position because practically any answer she gave would have created another controversy. Imagine she had refused to defend Stephanie White. The headlines would immediately have become speculation about a fractured locker room. Commentators would ask whether Caitlin had lost confidence in the coach. Every facial expression would be analyzed. Every quote would be treated as evidence of internal tension. She could have been accused of abandoning her coach when the pressure became intense. So from Caitlin's perspective, publicly supporting White makes complete sense. That's what stars and team leaders often do. But by defending her so strongly and expressing disgust at the boos, Caitlin also risks creating tension with the supporters, who played such a huge role in building her popularity and the Fever's current prominence. Remember what powered the Caitlin Clark phenomenon from the beginning. Ordinary basketball fans connected with her long before she arrived in Indiana. They watched her at Iowa, traveled to games, packed arenas, bought jerseys, followed every highlight, debated her game online, and defended her whenever skeptics claimed her style wouldn't translate to the professional level. When veteran players or commentators questioned the attention surrounding her, her supporters responded immediately and forcefully. That relationship between Caitlin and the audience helped create one of the biggest stories women's basketball has ever seen. So when some of those supporters now feel that Caitlin is dismissing their frustration entirely, the emotional reaction is predictable. They don't hear only a player defending her coach. Some hear their favorite player telling them that the frustration they've expressed after spending time and money supporting the franchise is illegitimate. That can be a dangerous perception for any public figure, especially someone whose connection with supporters has been such an important part of the larger phenomenon around her. Once fans begin believing their loyalty is appreciated only when it comes with unconditional praise, resentment can grow incredibly quickly. At the same time, we should separate fan criticism from actual responsibility. The people sitting in the stands did not design Indiana's offensive sets. They didn't decide the rotations. They didn't choose when to call timeouts. They didn't create confusing media situations. They didn't make roster decisions. They watched those choices happen and reacted to them. That distinction matters. Responding to a problem is not the same thing as causing it. When teams repeatedly point toward outside noise whenever criticism grows, fans often interpret that as an attempt to redirect attention away from performance. They hear a message that sounds like, keep supporting us, keep buying tickets, keep cheering, but stop examining what we're doing. That expectation is unrealistic in modern professional sports. Every major organization deals with criticism. Successful franchises generally learn how to absorb it without allowing the relationship with supporters to become openly hostile. They acknowledge legitimate frustrations, explain decisions when appropriate, make adjustments, and continue moving forward. Dysfunctional organizations tend to become defensive, close ranks, and eventually create an us-against-them atmosphere, with the same people keeping the business alive. That's why ownership's response is now so important. The Simon family and Pacers Sports and Entertainment have largely avoided turning this dispute into an even bigger public spectacle. Their silence can be interpreted in multiple ways. Maybe ownership fully supports Stephanie White and sees no reason to engage with criticism publicly. Or perhaps decision-makers are carefully assessing everything behind the scenes and don't want to say anything definitive before the season and organizational evaluations are complete. We simply don't know. But sooner or later, leadership has to recognize the seriousness of the disconnect. When a sizable portion of the fan base is openly frustrated, political figures are commenting publicly, and the franchise's biggest star is being asked to defend the head coach in a way that generates even more debate. That suggests there is a deeper issue that cannot be solved simply by labeling everything outside noise. And then there is the business side, which may ultimately matter more than any press conference argument. The Fever have experienced extraordinary growth in attendance, media attention, merchandise interest, and national relevance. Caitlin Clark has obviously been the primary force behind that explosion. Casual fans who previously might never have watched Indiana started buying tickets because they wanted to see her. National networks treated ordinary regular season games like major events because Caitlin was playing. Her jersey became one of the most recognizable pieces of merchandise in women's basketball. The entire franchise benefited tremendously from the audience she brought with her. If the relationship between that audience and the organization begins deteriorating because of avoidable conflicts like this, there can eventually be financial consequences. Season ticket renewals matter. Merchandise demand matters. Television interest matters. The franchise's ability to convert this extraordinary moment into lasting growth matters. Nobody should assume supporters will remain equally engaged forever, regardless of how they feel they're being treated. So where does this leave everybody? Caitlin Clark defended her coach, and that demonstrates loyalty to the locker room and a desire to protect team unity. That's admirable from a teammate's perspective. But she also chose language strong enough that some supporters now feel personally criticized by the player they have supported so passionately. Stephanie White received the public backing of her most important star. But the basketball concerns and communication issues that originally created the frustration have not magically disappeared because Caitlin defended her. And the fans now feel trapped between loyalty to Caitlin and anger toward parts of the organization. They're effectively hearing that their reaction was inappropriate while many of the circumstances that created their frustration remain unresolved. That is why this controversy is unlikely to disappear simply because Indiana won a big game. The offseason will bring serious conversations about coaching, roster construction, strategy, and the organization's long-term direction. This disagreement between the team and portions of the fan base will inevitably become part of that discussion, because no franchise can comfortably move forward when the relationship between leadership and its most engaged supporters becomes this strained. Indiana cannot fully capitalize on its historic momentum if the same people responsible for creating so much energy around the team begin feeling dismissed or disrespected. And ultimately, this isn't really a debate about whether Stephanie White has feelings. Obviously she does. Criticism hurts. Constant negativity wears people down. Anybody capable of empathy understands that. The more important question is whether the way she has responded to criticism is helping stabilize the organization or creating even more conflict around it. And for Caitlin, the lasting question is whether defending her coach in such forceful terms was worth risking unnecessary tension with a fan base that has supported her at an extraordinary level from college into the WNBA. So now I want to hear exactly where all of you stand, because this situation has clearly divided people. Do you think Caitlin did what any loyal franchise player should do by strongly defending Stephanie White in public? Should players always back their coaches in front of the cameras even when supporters believe they have legitimate basketball complaints about the product they're paying to watch? Or should Caitlin have chosen a more careful middle ground, one that defended her coach as a person while also acknowledging why sections of the fan base are frustrated? And most importantly, what should the Indiana Fever organization do from here to repair the growing tension with those supporters? Ignoring the problem and hoping everybody eventually forgets about it is not a serious long-term strategy for a professional franchise. This relationship needs to be addressed before next season begins. Drop your unfiltered thoughts, theories, and opinions in the comments, because I want to know how you see it. Tell me whether you believe the organization handled this correctly, or whether both sides made the situation worse than it ever needed to become. And if you want more detailed WNBA analysis that isn't afraid to get into the uncomfortable debates surrounding this league, hit the subscribe button. We are only beginning the off-season coverage, and you are not going to want to miss any of it.